Good morning.
Good morning, Gage.
Um, like to start today with just some brief introductions for anybody who's here, introduce kind of what we're doing, who we are, and all of those kind of things. And so I guess I'll start with that. The the name that I am generally called by is Gage. Um, I things that I do a lot of music, a lot of writing, a lot of just talking to people, whether through set meetings like this or out in general public. Um, Most recent thing that I have begun is the integrated life yoga service, where I offer out personal peace sessions, talk for a little while with people to determine kind of what's going on with them, what they would like to see out of their life, and then guide a sort of practice session of yoga, breath work, meditation, all of those things, and then play some music at the end to see if we can come to a space of a little bit more intimate experience of life that they can carry through. Um, and these conversations we talked about as just like an organic unfoldment of our normal interactions, which, like you've talked to me about before, nobody else gets to see our one-to-one conversations most of the time. They do tend to be some very distinctive uh, interactions, and so I am excited to see what comes out of these, and to see how what the reaction to them is. Is there anything that you would like to add aside from just talking a little about yourself?
Um, yeah, I think the question of like, who am I in introductions is always an interesting one because there's like the automatic conditioned response of like what I do. And then there's like the deeper question of who am I really? But I'll save the deeper stuff for later. My name is Will. I live in North Georgia in the mountains with my girlfriend Molly. And some things that I do is I recently started a life coaching practice and I lead retreats with Gage. And I rent out an Airstream on Airbnb. And I'm currently working on building a geodesic dome that will also be a rental. And I also spend a lot of time in the woods, hiking, backpacking, foraging for mushrooms, just playing in the woods. And I met Gage at LSU, where we both graduated in the last couple of years. Molly, my girlfriend, actually met him and somehow got hold of a book he was writing and emailed it to me. I was not at LSU at the time, I was here in the mountains. And I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, I got to meet this dude. And then we met a couple months later, and slowly our friendship and partnership in life has started to develop. And like he said, I've noticed that when it's just the two of us, our conversations are very interesting and insightful. And I think are because we're both so introspective and relatively still, quiet, and like spacious, our conversations just create a space where a lot of insights come through and interesting exploration. So to echo what you said, Gage, I'm excited to record our conversation and see where this takes us.
Mm. And so with all of that, I think I would like to start, since you already mentioned the question of who am I really? I'd like to start with the question of like, what does it mean to you? What does it mean to be? And also, what does it mean to be Will? Like, what is that experience like?
Yeah. To me, that's such like a foundational question. Like it's the foundation that my whole life is built upon. And it's a foundation that seems, at least in my experience and what seems like most people's experience, just happens automatically, subconsciously, without a lot of thought. You just sort of land on this self, and it just sort of forms. And then if you are like myself, then at some point you start questioning, like, wait, who am I really? Like, what is this all about? And so, what does it mean to be? Um, it's hard to put words on that. I mean, it's to be is to, like I said, it's like the foundation of our existence.
Mm,
It's like it's always there. Our beingness is just, to me, the space of existence that is at the core of existence. And I think most people, including myself, often step over that, lose sight of that, and have no awareness of that space of being. There's just a lot of stuff piled on top of it. So to truly be, for me, is to get in touch with that foundation, with that, the
mm,
ground of being, the source of who we are. And for me, that has come with a lot of digging and a lot of breakdowns, um, and just curiosity with who I am. And from that space, like consciously being means to just relax into my capital S self
mm.
and just be. And before I get into what it means to be Will, I'd like to let you touch on what I've said so far.
I wholeheartedly feel the inevitableness that you alluded to. It just like it's incredibly difficult slash impossible to articulate being, because it is the thing that is prior to articulation. Um, but the something that has come up for me recently in just my own day-to-day activities and feeling more and more into that beingness is recognizing, I guess, a distinction between sense of self and sense of being.
Mm.
And what I see in that, like how some of the things that work very effectively for me to, even if my brain is running for a day and there's just a bunch of activity happening, uh, then if I can catch that, then if I can feel into my sense of being, that I can get behind all of that movement, all of that activity fairly easily. And the way that that distinction is made to me is not like a conceptual thing where I'm sitting there thinking like, okay, is this self or is this being? Is this whatever? It's just like, if I can sit with that question of who am I, or what I prefer is like, where are we right now? Um, and actually looking for like, okay, where is my sense of self right now? What is my experience of my being? Then if I put my attention on something and it disappears, then it was a sense of self and not a sense of being. Because like the self, like you said, is just the buildup of all those stories and the narratives that happen around um, kind of physical, emotional, mental experience in life. And then if I hit on something that feels like it's not me, but it is intrinsically connected to the core of what I am, uh, and it doesn't disappear or waver with attention, then that is like, that's my sense of being. And then that thing is a bottomless, vast expanse of ocean that at any given point in time can be like dived into, uh, and just swimming around in that ocean is the interesting experience to me of being both a self and a being, of like feeling into diving into that ocean and still having kind of an individuation in humanness.
Like we've dove right into the heart of the matter. And it's always a good sign to me when I start hitting like paradoxes. And so, I'm already kind of stuck in a way in this paradox of like how it's almost like my sense of self that is speaking about the being. And like you said, the being can't be captured in words or concepts, and my speaking seems to be limited to words and concepts. So it's like you can never really get there with the words. It's like we're dancing around this being, and we're never going to capture it. We can only play with and point to that. And I love that sort of experiment or that test that you have, where it's like, okay, if I look at this and it disappears, then it's not my being. And if I look at it and it's still there, it survives my attention, then that's my being. That seems so simple yet so effective in taking one to beingness.
Mm. In the vein of what you said about that being can't be articulated, but that we are sitting here talking through our selves to, I guess, share being in a way, with both between us and with whoever it is that ends up listening to our conversations. I I really resonate with musical terminology, um, and I like the process of self transformation as using being, or the recognition of that being, as a tuning fork for the self. it's like the more closely aligned the sense of self is to the spacious depth of being, the kind of ineffableness of that as yourself moves into the flow of things more fully, I feel like being is able to be conveyed through self in the process of uh, like the action of being as an individuated human in the world. And so for me, these conversations are like sharing being with you while also having the entertainment of trying to articulate various things. But the articulation to me is secondary to the statement or the tone of being that exists in both of us as a singular thing in this collective space.
Hmm. So what I'm hearing is that being takes on form, or like the energy or frequency that the form consists of can be like a direct expression of being, and it's not necessarily the words or the forms, but more like the energy that it emits, or the frequency, like the resonance of those actions or words that directly aligns with and is an expression of that space of being. So I'm curious then, like in your view, what are some examples of being or and or not being, like alignment with being versus out of alignment with being?
Mm. Um, I feel alignment with being as like a freeing experience in terms of like subjective self experience. It's freeing in that it fulfills um, don't really want to use the word desires right here, but that's the only thing that's really coming up. But it fulfills desires, like it minimizes the influence of external phenomena, whether it's um, like external validation from others or needing a specific environment or any of those things to fuel a feeling of like empowerment or happiness or connection, love, any of those things. It's like being in a completely released space of like love and happiness and all of those things inside of yourself. Sometimes even in the circumstance that you would be feeling sad or angry or any of those things, like not excluding any part of human experience, but recognizing the totality of alignment through experience with the ground of existence that is being. Um, and that to me just feels like an unburdened sensation, like a deep sigh kind of.
Mm-hmm.
what have you noticed as like the qualities of experience that come through in alignment versus out of alignment?
Yeah, I think what you said with like the fulfillment of a desire resonates. Uh, to me, yeah, it's like if there's an itch that someone's trying to reach, trying to itch, and can't quite satisfy that itch when a action or song or person who comes through, or an energy within themselves that comes through that's in alignment, there's like that sensation of the itch being scratched, like the itch finally being scratched. You're just like, oh, that's the spot, like that's it right there. um, and as you were talking about desires, like it almost occurs to me as like a disappearing of the things I thought I wanted or the things I thought I needed suddenly vanish in that space of like alignment. And I'm like, oh my God, why did I even want that thing? Like why was I so obsessed with trying to get, maybe it was a job or a significant other or something I was really, had in my head that once I get that, then I'll be happy. And then alignment comes, I'm like, why was I chasing so hard after something that didn't, my deeper self knew that that wasn't going to give me fulfillment. This is the feeling, the space that I was really after. And to give a concrete example, there was one time when it was when we were going on that spring break trip, and it was you, Molly, and I in the car, and we were having a conversation about something along these lines. And I don't know if like Molly was asking a question. I think Molly asked us like, so is there something I'm missing that you guys seem to have found or something? And I was like trying to explain it, like trying essentially is the word there. I was trying to, and then something you said, or just something clicked in me. Like it was like I merged into alignment, and then there was like nothing, like I felt different. I felt whole and complete, and like I didn't have to try to give this answer to myself or Molly. And it was just like that trying disappeared, and I was just like content.
So the feeling of reaching dissipated into a feeling of not reaching. That kind of like the Taoist Wu Wei non-action thing of just like sitting back and watching the unfolding.
And then the interesting thing that I find often happens with that is like, here's another example. Like if you were reaching for an apple and you couldn't quite reach it, you're jumping and trying to grab it. Alignment would be when you like, I don't even need that apple. I'm not even hungry. And you're just like, ah. And then at that moment, the apple would fall from the tree. That seems to be the case a lot of the times. When I stop trying, like it just happens.
And so a question that comes up for me in that I've noticed in a couple of different conversations as well as in my own experience is when you move into that alignment and feel that like, I don't even really want that anymore. And then things seem to fall into place but what happens to motivation in that space? Like how, or if, how does motivation arise if it arises? Or is there just no need for motivation at that point in time?
I think that's a really good question that trips me and a lot of people up, because there's like this, well, I want to be content, but if I'm content, then I'll never do anything else in my life and I'll just sit in a cave and starve to death or something along those lines. And it's a really interesting exploration. Like, if I'm entirely content with what I have and who I am, then what happens to motivation? Like, do I keep working my job and um, working to get the things that I want, or do I just stay at home and sit on the couch all day because I'm so content with who I am? And for me, when in those moments where I'm really in that space of being and content, there is a lot of energy, like way more energy
Mm,
in that can be freely used in
mm,
any way. It's like, I think the energy shifts from a state of trying to survive to a state of like freely creating. And so the motivation becomes less um, dependent or needy or like out of alignment, stressed out, and it becomes motivation, or even like an inspired state, like an inspiration
mm.
to just express and create and serve others in a way that is completely detached from any outcomes and needless. And at least from my experience, I have way more energy when I'm in that state, and like procrastination no longer is a thing because I want to do the things that I'm doing.
Mm,
Like, it all feels good and I can just go, 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 go freely, versus like when I'm like in college, when I was really motivated to get good grades. It's like, I gotta pass this test. I gotta pass this test. And then I would sit down to study and be like, oh, I don't want to do this. And so I procrastinate, and it just created um, this motivation that was really intense, but also not really effective in. I mean, I guess it was effective in getting decent grades, but it often seemed very unproductive or inefficient, I think is the right word.
mm.
It lacks an efficiency that, just like when your wheels are out of alignment in your car, um, it just doesn't work. It ends up wearing down the vehicle,
Mm.
leads to a breakdown, which isn't sustainable.
Yeah, so all of that sounded to me like instead of having drives based on wants or perceived needs for things, like trying to work for something, expending personal energy in order to achieve or reach for that apple. It's like rather than a what can I get, it's a what can I give. Like I have all this energy and it's overflowing, so like what do I do with it? And then that opens up for like a vibrant sort of creative expression to be the mode of being that you fall into.
Mm, yeah. Another analogy or thought that came up is when you're in that state, when you're out of alignment and there's a lot of motivation, we tend to get tunnel vision on something that we think would be really good for us, but oftentimes it isn't realistic, or it just isn't a good match for where we're at. Like it might be like a fish in a stream deciding that it wants to climb a tree. Like maybe it's possible, but it's probably not in the cards, and it's probably just going to lead to the fish either dying or being let down because it can't get to the top of the tree.
Mm,
Versus when we're in alignment, the fish doesn't necessarily have some goal that it's attached to, but it can like read the river, say like, okay, that tree doesn't seem really likely, but there is this, rapid that's right there that I can probably get up, and I don't know what's on the other side of that, but
mm,
it's right there, and it seems like um, the most appropriate action at this time. Uh, it's kind of a weird analogy, but
but
I
so
think
the fish or the individual just meets the development of the situation that they find themselves in a creative and vital way, a very like energetic, not necessarily like a manic sort of enthusiasm, but just like a very eager, empowered sort of meeting of life's circumstance in a very, the word that keeps coming up in my mind is intimate, in like a very intimate way, being able to feel out where you are and what is the best avenue for that creative energy.
mhm, yeah, we get intimately connected with reality. And when you're connected to reality, you you're like, it's like your fingers on the pulse, and you know exactly where to stand so as to be carried forward by the energy.
Mm,
And it's like life just pulls you forward, and it's like this effortless flow. Versus when we're out of touch with reality, it's like we just, everything we do kind of falls short, and it's like we just keep trying, and it's just out of the flow.
mm,
And yeah, one a question I have for you is like, what, so we've sort of distinguished two different states, one of alignment, one out of alignment. The first, I mean, the biggest question I think that's there for me is like, how do you get, if you've never been in that flow, if you know you're out of alignment and things just aren't working for you, how does one get into alignment?
mm. The first thing that came up in that was just recognizing that you're out of alignment is, I think, like the most potent possible place to start there. Because like somebody can work off of a kind of pretty harmful sense of drive or motivation that like really doesn't serve them for a long time. Uh, but if the person has a little bit of space in that to step back and like, oh, this actually isn't good for me. This isn't working. We need to try something else. then just that little bit of space and willingness to like move into something else is probably the biggest piece of that all on its own. Um, because I feel like getting out of that like really sort of aggressive state of motivation and moving into a little bit more space of like I have no idea what I need to do, but there needs to be something different, kind of necessitates a quality of listening, not necessarily like ears listening, but like being listening of like what is a better thing, what would be serving me right now, how can I move into a space where I feel more at peace, more in line with my creative energy and all of those kind of things. um, and then from there, I like there are infinite different little tools and tricks to come further into alignment, infinite different meditation, prayer, any kind of like techniques to use. But my favorite ones that seem to be the most simple, widely applicable across like religious or cultural traditions, um, are breath work and um, and like what we talked about earlier with feeling into starting with that question that we started with, like who am I really, and what is it that that thing would like to do. If you're looking for something else to do, how to act as a human in alignment with being, then starting with that finding of yourself. um, and breath work, whether it's holotropic style breath work, or I really like Wim Hof breathing. Um, but doing 30 minutes of Wim Hof breathing, I like there is no way for my brain to hang on to any of the stories that I may have running through. Like there, my brain can be the most active that it has ever been on a given day. And if I breathe like that for 30 minutes, then I will have no idea who or where I am. And everything will just feel very tingly and light. And it's like an automatic reset. Um, and then just feeling into like, okay, this is what I think I am right now, looking at it really hard for a second. And if it wavers or disappears, I'm like, that's not it. Move on to the next one until you hit that like bedrock of like, okay, this is the thing that's solid. And like, that doesn't even feel like it's me. It doesn't feel like I own this. Like, even better. Um, that opens up for a collective space and more of that collaborative, giving, serving energy. Um, Another one that I have been really fond of recently is tracing senses. Um, so if you hear something, then like, okay, what is it that is receiving the sensation of hearing? And seeing if you can follow the hearing all the way back, like into your head where it feels like it's going, and then like, okay, but what is it? Who is it that is receiving that hearing, or the sight, or the taste, or the cold sensation, or whatever it is? Um, and all of those, I think, are just like ways to hone the skill of full being listening.
Yeah, there's so much gold there. Um, and I'm really enjoying this conversation. I think it's really cool. Just seeing where it's flowing.
Mm.
Um, the first thing that I think is significant there, or has is gold, is the realization of being out of alignment. And that's I would say I think in Buddhism it would equate to like the first noble truth.
Mm,
And a lot of people aren't there, or don't, maybe at some level they know it, but they haven't really looked at maybe there's another way, or
mm,
maybe they're just um, way of being isn't the only way of being. It's just like an automatic, this is what I do. I wake up and I grind all day, and my mind is just racing always. And I go to sleep and I wake up and I do it again every day. And then there's tends, at least for me, to be a moment where there's like a little bit of space that opens up, and it's like, this isn't working. Like, I can't do this. And for some
mm,
people, it's like literally a midlife crisis or a horrible diagnosis or some aggressive wake up call that's like, this isn't working. This isn't sustainable. You're just driving yourself into the ground.
mm,
And at that moment, there's like the realization that I'm out of alignment, or it could be um, defined in another way, but essentially, this isn't working, and there's got to be something else. I've got to shift something, otherwise, I'm just killing myself, essentially.
mm,
And then, yeah, from that realization, like a genuine search for a new way of being, alignment, being connected with our true nature. Uh, there's so many people, tools, books, questions, like you said, that will support the individual in coming into alignment between, meditations and yoga and question and therapists and coaches and teachers and all sorts of different tools and techniques to shift the energy into one that's more intimately connected with reality and in alignment with the flow of life. And yeah, you highlighted a few that work for you, and when people ask me like what to do in that regard, I think it depends on each individual. Like some
yeah.
people, yoga is great. Some people, meditation is great. Some people can't stand meditation, and they may need to work with an individual to just talk through what's going on in their space.
Mm,
Um, but I think ultimately, someone who has like a genuine curiosity and intention to discover their true selves and discover alignment, the people and tools will kind of show up to them
mm,
as needed. And yeah, I guess I wonder, like for you and I feel like we've discovered to a degree alignment and how that feels. And I am like, I want everyone to feel this. Like I want
mm,
other people to have access to this space of being and the experience of living in a state of alignment. And so those people who are either in denial or unconscious of their out of alignment, and I can't even say for sure that they are. I mean, maybe their way of being is better than mine, or not better, but they are exactly where they are, and it's only my ego that's saying that my space is more enjoyable than their space,
mm,
although intuitively I do feel like there's more joy available when we're in alignment. So I guess my question is, for those of us who are in alignment or are on this journey to alignment and have discovered more ease and joy and fulfillment, and then have this energy of like, how can I serve other people? How can I assist the development or awakening of others? How do we do that?
There are a lot of things inside of that. So one, I would like to just say initially that I think everyone does experience alignment, um, even if they're in a space that is definitely not working or any of those things. That is just more of the stories and the clouding of that sense of being that is in my view our natural state, the state that is like before we start putting a bunch of ideas and opinions and everything on ourselves and the world. That is where we're at all the time, because it's just the natural unfolding of our existence. um, and so the thing would be moving towards like listening closer so that you can recognize the alignment and start to tune yourself to it. Um, and then how do we serve people from this space of having recognized things that work for you, things that seem to bring you into a space where you feel that creative energy more, where you feel the intimacy with life and all of those things that fulfill you without needing to spend all of your time and energy towards like getting something that you think will fulfill you. Um, and there are multiple different answers to that. I'm not going to pretend like I have the only right one. Um, and the answer that I most don't like is that there's not anything that we can do about it. It is everyone's choice as to whether or not or when they decide to want to move more into alignment or to recognize that like this isn't working. Because I feel like a lot of the time it's like people know that what they're doing isn't working, but it doesn't come into a conscious recognition of like being able to say, this is not working for me. I need to try something else, which I think is partially influenced by, I know at least like the cultural environment that I grew up in. It's like anything worth having takes hard work, and it's like really life is a struggle all the time, and everything needs to be difficult, or else you're just like not living. Um, and that sort of idea has to be internally dismantled in order to come into that space of like joy and ease and recognizing that like I can be taken care of without working myself to death. Um, and other than that, I think like for me, what service comes to is like we talked about earlier, like listening to your river, listening to whatever stream that you as a fish are swimming in, and meeting it where it's at, tuning yourself to being so that you, in your own existence, in your expression in the world, become a tuning fork that is as close to the essence of being as possible, so that anywhere you go, that like tone is being expressed through you and felt by the tones of others.
Yeah.
What I am super interested to hear your response to that same, like, what do you think is the is the service that we provide.
Yeah, well, there's some clicking that I'm getting on my end, and I think it might be. Is there a microphone on your headphones?
There is. Is it
I think
clicking
it's
against the
hitting
beads?
your beats, yeah. Um,
All right.
yeah, I think what you said with like listening. I mean, I think what doesn't work, and I know this from direct experience, like, is going to people and being like, "Oh my God, like, there's this thing, and you got to do it," and like pushing alignment or pushing your personal awakenings or realizations onto other people. It's just seems to turn people off and make people feel like you're judging them, and people don't like that. So not doing that, I think, yeah, I think holding space ultimately is an effective way to support other people wherever they're at, and just a non-judgmental space where people can really feel like they can be themselves is like an attractive quality. Like people seem to be like pulled into that space oftentimes, and then listening, from that open space, just listening to the individuals that come into that space. And if there's any questions, or, you know, they have a curiosity and seem to at some level be interested in the way of being that you model, then it's just kind of like an intuitive answering questions, or asking them questions, reflecting themselves back to them, that seems to be conducive for accelerating the development of others. And also modeling and reflecting like what alignment looks like, the embodiment of being, just showing that to the world, just walking down the street, and other people might either consciously or subconsciously like get something just from seeing or being in the presence of someone who is embodying a state of like being in alignment. Yeah. And yeah, like, the tuning fork analogy, like playing the resonance that allows other people to sense or feel aligned. And then I'm curious about the first thing you said, like everyone has experienced alignment. And so you feel like all infants come into the world completely in alignment with reality?
I feel like it's kind of both all the time. Like the way that I see this, and again, not that this is the factual way of how this works, but like as a soul comes into an infant, I feel that it comes out of that space of beingness into the space of like being inside of beingness, but also being individuated as a human, in the world. And so there's like this jarring shift of coming from the place where there is no desire to be fulfilled, no, like there is just fulfillment and totality and infinite potential and all of those things that are kind of wrapped up inside of the peace and like the tranquil spaciousness of being, um, and come into this space where it's like I can't do anything for myself. I know that I'm hungry, but I have no means by which to get food unless these people do it for me. Coming from the space that encompasses all power into a, like, bringing that full power into a being that, or into a incarnation that is powerless, is, has got to be just jarring. I have no recollection of my first moments as a human being, but um, it does seem like infants and even kids up until a certain point have an incredible ease in, like, even if they got angry at something or even if they were upset by something, then like within 5 seconds there can be just an entire shift in mood and they can be back to like, playing with sticks or a pine cone or whatever, just being like happy as can be, um, or chewing on a toe or whatever it is. Um, and so I feel like they, in not having quite as much of the narrative going on about what I am, what the world is, how everything comes to be, because there hasn't been that conceptual learning process yet, and like language isn't that established yet. There does seem to be more ease in like flowing in and out of the state of alignment. Um, but one of the interesting things to me is that like if you have no way of distinguishing alignment from unalignment, aside from just like sometimes I feel very upset and sometimes I don't, as like a an infant or whatever, like sometimes there is pleasurable sensation and sometimes there is discomfort, then how, like that interests me in the scope of like once you move out of that space and you have distinctions and you have language and you have all of those things that are like heavily ingrained, even if you can get behind the language into a place where there's again like not really a discernible distinction between alignment and unalignment in the conceptual modes, what, and I have no idea how to articulate this question or any speculative answer to it, but like how, what does full alignment look like to the point that there is not even like a conceptual or conscious recognition or claim in the sense of self that like I am in alignment or I am out of alignment right now? Like, is there a space like an infantile place that we can come to, still having the faculties of our mind and like being able to navigate the world and things, but like in our own subjective experience, having no distinction between like anything internally or anyone else being in versus out of alignment and just seeing like
Mm.
beingness in all of its expressions everywhere.
I was gonna say death originally,
Mm,
but then you said with the faculties to continue on living. Um, I have no idea. I mean, this doesn't exactly answer your question, but I feel like you can sense people's energies. You can like see it in their face. Like you can tell when someone's totally like lost in thought or stressed out by something,
Mm.
just by their facial expressions. Like you can almost see them kind of tense and like stressed. And with infants, I feel like you can see the opposite of like you were saying, like total ease. And their eyes are just so like, just like there's a spacious emptiness there, like
Mm.
that is so at ease. Like there's nothing they're holding on to. There's no stress there. I mean, there might be an upset, but even in that, it's just like coming through without any questioning or holding back or any tension, any
Mm.
friction. And so, I mean, I in one way, I sort of imagine that to be full alignment. But obviously, the infant doesn't have the means necessary to also care for themselves and
Mm.
is entirely dependent upon their caregivers to provide what they need to survive.
And so do you think, like, on an intuitive level, that we, and taking this from like the sort of biblical quote of like, become as little children, and lest ye become as little children you shall not inherit the kingdom of heaven, do you think that we could move back into that state of total dependence, but have the caregiver be the beingness that drops the apple when you let go? Or like a way to align so fully, what in Taoism they call, or in I believe it's called Nidan Gong, the Taoist internal alchemy. Um, the last stage is the emergence of man with Tao. Um, and in some sects of like Hindu culture, they call the people who have attained the great enlightenment the walking dead. Um, some way of coming to a place where, while still inhabiting the individuation or the incarnation of a human being, there could be total dependence on the inner being and the and be the tuning fork from that point forward.
So in that state, do you, to me, it seems like it would be a just complete absence or death of the self, a death of the ego, and there's just a completely empty vessel there.
Mm.
Has no need or no mind activity. I mean, maybe there would be, but like in the sense of thoughts, it would just be an empty spaciousness, no separation between self and other, just like a blank, an emptiness. Like the
Mm.
Walking Dead, I think, is a good way of phrasing it. And food just shows up when it needs food, and or there's just a like flow, I guess. When the being is hungry, then it finds food, I suppose.
Mm.
So like that's it. Is that what it would, intuitively, and using our imaginations, like would it be like that? Like there's just no thoughts, and if so, like would there even be speaking? Would they be eternally silent? Or on the other end of the spectrum is that state of enlightenment or full alignment, does it still have all of the language and thinking capacity and distinction ability there, but it's always like, is the ego and the mind still there, and it's just never ever consumed or even really distracted by those, and even when it's speaking and working and interacting with others, it's still coming from the space of being and like playing with the mind up here and like channeling itself through.
I think that, and the way that it seems to me, because I don't think that that space, if it is wrapped up in the totality of being, I don't think that it would exclude anything, even like any of the experiences or like natural movements of being a human, but it would include not only like your humanness, but like the totality of being as well. And so the way that I see that in like in full individuated expression would be like being able to utilize the mind, the ego, all of those things in service of that being in form, but also being able to like suspend it at any point in time through like I don't know, like a way that we can fully relax ourselves into being sleepy or something like that, being able to completely remove activity from the mind and body and then re-inhabit it and kind of have that ability to flow in and out.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it feels like to me. But again, that is beyond my current experience. So I cannot, I, I can't speak that as something that I have experienced and know by experiencing.
Mm-hmm. How attainable realistically do you think that is for us humans?
I would imagine that it's probably way easier than I would think it to be. Um, it's probably one of those things like the times or the first time that I had a meditation where everything felt like completely clear and like I felt transparent and all of those things. It was like, wow, I've been trying way too hard. The amount of time that it took for this is not a testament um, to my perseverance or any of those things so much as it is a testament to my stubbornness and unwillingness to actually get out of my own way. Um, and so I think that state could be infinitely accessible. But I think that the vast majority of time, we don't want to be there because that is terrifying. That space of like not wanting things the state of total freedom to be able to like move in and out of your physical being, or just like completely stop your thoughts, because that requires like everything, at least as far as I see, that requires all of the things that my sense of self sees to be important or meaningful to be completely unimportant slash unmeaningful, not in that they're genuinely not important, but that they're not any more important than anything else is.
Yeah. The absence of any preferences. One thing I feel is that, like you said, it's more attainable to embody that space than most of us think it is. And I think that's one of the beliefs in humanity that holds us back from attaining it.
Mm.
Like, I was on this Vipassana retreat, and the general sense there was that lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes of practice are necessary in order for to hit the first state of, I don't know exactly what they called it, but like the first step towards enlightenment.
Mm.
And it was like that was a sort of belief, whether it was like conscious or unconscious, that seemed to be like, well, obviously if you have that belief, you're never going to allow yourself to experience what may or may not be enlightenment.
Mm.
And I think just in general, in conversations with people, there's sort of, we could talk about this, but there's this general sense or belief that, why even bother talking about it? It's like there's no point, or it's just so far in the distance that it's not even worth pursuing.
Mm.
And I think, one of the things that we could do in this conversation is look at that belief and start to loosen or dispel the belief that that state of freedom is hard to achieve or unattainable. And yeah, I feel like you said, it's perhaps right here always, and it's not like we have to do some crazy acrobatic act to touch it.
Mm.
To me, it feels almost like a blind spot in your car, and no matter how much you look in the mirrors, you're never going to see that blind spot, but all it takes is like one turn of the head and it's like right
Mm.
there. And yeah, I feel like that freedom is just right there for everybody. And there's a sense that it's not.
I think some of that, at least like in my experience, a lot of the times that I have a difficult time letting go of something is because there is a really interesting sort of sense of accomplishment in struggle.
Mm,
And that to me seems like letting go of the feeling of having accomplished, because like even that state, as much as I may conceptualize it as like an attainment, like if that is just reverting to our natural state of being in tune with being, then that is not an accomplishment. It's just getting rid of all of the shit, like having a trophy in the corner of your closet and pulling the pile of clothes or whatever off of the trophy. It's not like a new thing that you gain. It's just like reverting to a spot when you are not self-sabotaging. And I think that like I like that as being a sort of focus in the conversations of like how to rearrange beliefs around the free state of being, or just different things around that. And I would also, I think, like to incorporate kind of implications of that state of being as far as like the collective of human beings or the planet itself is concerned. Like in addition to the freest possible state that we as humans could or can move into or step into, what does the culture, what does the planet, the environment, what does community look like through the lens of people being either in their journey or freed? Because I know that I personally, and in a lot of the things that I've studied over time about freedom and enlightenment and all the spiritual practices and everything else, it tends to be a lot of things around like isolation, a bunch of people who have sought out solitude and all of those things. There are exceptions to that. But that seems to be like a dominant theme a lot of the time. And I don't think that that's necessary. I think that we could feasibly have an entire community, an entire country, an entire planet full of people who were in that space, in freedom, in all of those things. And I'm super interested in the speculative discussion of what that community would look like and what that community would look like in cooperation with the planet that we live on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, one thing that comes up is, again, this sort of belief that I don't think is true, that I had, and I think most people tend to have, is like to explore freedom or to experience, inner freedom. There's like a drastic shift in the external world. Like, you're working a corporate job and then you pursue freedom or experience freedom, then like suddenly you have to quit your job and go move to the mountains and live a life of solitude, or join like a commune or become a monk. And that just isn't true. I mean, it could be true. You might become more interested in that inner exploration than whatever has you working your corporate job. Or I think perhaps more likely case, and I actually have a friend who is doing this. Like, he had a series of awakenings or internal experiences of freedom, and he was working a corporate construction job and nothing changed. Like, he had these experiences and he's like, realizes it, and he's like, yeah, everyone around me is so like stressed out and caught up in their work, and I'm just like, it's not a big deal. I just go to work, do my job, enjoy it, and have fun with the people around me, and go home. And I'm not trying to become, like, I'm not desperately trying to climb the ladder. And like, people are telling me I could be the CEO. And it's interesting to see him evolve internally and just continue the exact same lifestyle he was in. And I don't know if that will continue forever, but I do think it's entirely possible and perhaps likely for, someone in politics or like the least enlightened positions in society to experience internal freedom and continue doing what they're doing. And from an external perspective, you would have no idea, other than they might seem a little more at ease and smiley and relaxed in what they're doing. And then, as they make that subtle shift, similar to you, I wonder like what is now possible for the space around them, and for like, I feel like it's a subtle shift initially, but when people are no longer desperate to get something else and just kind of like content with where they're at and have that sort of motivation to give and to serve, then although it's not like a dramatic shift initially, the possibility from individuals and collectives living and embodying that space is like enormous, and in ways that we don't even know and we can't even imagine. Like, what happens if a company is entirely free internally, and what shifts in how they express their company, how they do work for communities. And it's been like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
If you're cool with this, I'd like to start wrapping this up.
Yeah.
And explore like what we could possibly, what the next conversation could look like, and where to go from here. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on any of that.
As far as the structure of the next conversation, the things that I have in my brain at the moment are either to continue with kind of how today's went, with just like seeing this week if any questions arise, or even like releasing this conversation and seeing if there are questions that come in around it. And then use that as a way to initiate, and then let it flow as they tend to. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Like, I think it would be cool to continue, allowing it to flow organically, and to field questions, whether it be, if someone's listening to this and they're like, a question pops up in their mind, like, please, wherever we release this, reach out to us or type it somewhere that we can see it. And like, now that we've had this conversation, I'm going to be listening just to people in my life and see like what may be helpful or of value to them to hear about. And with that, like, speak to that in a next conversation.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely wonderful.
But based on this conversation, I have no doubt that like the conversation will continue to just take on a life of its own, and we will be carried through 90 minutes very quickly.
All right, so I have one more question for you before we wrap up.
Okay.
If you were to find a lamp somewhere and you rubbed it and a genie came out, what would your wishes be?
there's two directions I want to go with this. One is like, I wish for internal peace and happiness, and with everybody in the world. I wish for like a world that works, and I wish for a happy family. But the other, like, I actually think this is a really fun thought experiment. Like, okay, he grants those 3 wishes. Now you have 3 more wishes. Now you have 3 more wishes. And ultimately, and if you're listening to this, I would invite you to try this thought experiment of like, the genie just keeps giving you wishes and you keep getting whatever you want. Ultimately, I got to a place where I was like, getting what I want wouldn't necessarily increase the well-being of my life. And actually, I like not knowing what I'm gonna get. Like, I like game of life and how we don't know what we're gonna get, and the surprise element of that. Like, it would be no fun on Christmas morning if you knew exactly what you're gonna get. So if I were to take that question the other way, I would say nothing. Like, this is what I want, and I like not knowing what I'm gonna get. What about you?
Could take it definitely both of those directions. I love the surprise and the sort of playful interaction with life that comes from not knowing what's coming, and like being grateful for whatever it is and using whatever it is that spontaneously arises as more fuel for my own evolution, or service to the world. But the 3 wishes that would come out immediately would be, one, like mastery of my bodily / mental functions. Being able to consciously influence heart rate, brain waves, and all of those things in like a relatively quick kind of way would be just really cool. Second would be a sustainable world where everyone is taken care of, where nobody has to worry about survival things. And third, a little piece of land with a geodesic dome on it that I could call a yoga center that people could come to and just hang out for a week.
Very cool.
I so thoroughly appreciate this conversation this week.
As do I. It exceeded any and all expectations I had for how this would go.
And I love you with all of my heart. You're an excellent being.
Thank you, and same to you.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday.